think when I'm talking with companies and they may be interested in it, the important thing for me to remind them is people today just can't afford not to have employment, right? And yet employers are screaming and saying, we need people with skills, we need the right skills. Doing a custom apprenticeship, they're able to develop the program into what they need as an employer and give the employee a chance to not only have employment while they're learning, but also to have those incremental pay increases so they know there's, it's a growing thing for them.
I think the apprenticeship is really going to help my family life one day because I also can make a good income now. So it's not just relying on my husband or relying on somebody else. We have two good incomes, and I think that's really going to help because a lot of females, I think, don't think that they can go into trades that you can make a lot of good money in, but you can if you just put your mind to it, and it's really helpful when you have two solid incomes.
The apprenticeship program has helped me in my personal life by allowing me to complete my degree without student loans. I have 0 loans, which is an amazing thing to say and an amazing thing to feel, especially at 23 years old. And the financial benefits have been fantastic because I've also been able to buy a house this year.
The apprenticeship program has helped me in my family life in more of a financial way, first of all, because it did help me get my first associate's degree at a university for free, and that was a huge difference for us. And now, as my husband and I are expecting, it let us buy our first home when we got married. So I actually was a homeowner at 19 years old, which is pretty rare. So that has really helped. I also make a very nice wage for myself at the age I am, and it's also, I've been a full-time employee, so I have a retirement plan already set up and everything, and I'm really ahead in life in this aspect.
Welcome to the Women in Manufacturing Registered Apprenticeship Program Best Practices webinar. Through the Women in Manufacturing Association's partnership with Jobs for the Future, our corporate members, chapters, and individual members have access to a streamlined way of building their own registered apprenticeship program by providing technical assistance in recruiting, retaining, and training women in manufacturing registered apprenticeship programs. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Melissa MacGregor, Director at Jobs for the Future, and a pracademic with a passion for connection between education and employment. Melissa is currently leading 2 bodies of work, one in equity-focused employer engagement, and the other is a Department of Labor-funded industry intermediary contract supporting registered apprenticeships in manufacturing as well as related fields. Melissa is a subject matter in registered apprenticeship implementation processes and a field expert in outreach and employer engagement. Melissa's doctoral research focused on community college-sponsored registered apprenticeship programs. I'd like to now welcome Melissa.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate it, and it is great to be with you today. I am going to share my screen. So today we're going to talk about targeted recruiting and retention practices for registered apprenticeship programs. As Lisa already said, I'm with Jobs for the Future. If you're not familiar with Jobs for the Future, we are a national nonprofit that sits at the intersection of education and workforce. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is on registered apprenticeship programs, which fits very nicely in that between space between education and workforce. And our mission is to achieve equitable economic advancement for all. So today we're going to talk about some labor market shifts. We're going to do some self-reflection. We are going to talk about 2 frameworks that Jobs for the Future has recently released on job quality and on a program design framework for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in registered apprenticeship programs. And then I'm going to talk about partnerships and tools, targeted outreach, understanding how your community sees your company, ideas for casting a wide net. We're going to explore some how might we statements, and then you can request some one-on-one support. So let's take a look at some trends to set the stage for our conversation. Today's labor market has shifted. Recruiting practices need to shift with it to stay relevant. Companies are seeking candidates. Candidates are seeking employers who value their input and the diversity that comes with it. And employers with a diverse workforce are able to think more broadly and solve problems in a better way. We have to recognize the uneven pandemic recovery. So some industries were hit harder than others during the pandemic, and workers remember that and they still feel it. I've heard of job candidates asking potential new employers how they treated their workers during the pandemic as an indication of how they might be treated. So we have to be prepared for that. We need to acknowledge the impact of this, that it's had on the labor market. And there's remote options are prevalent. And so that's impacting our ability to recruit. The shelf life of skills. So who remembers travel agents? For the younger folks in the crowd, they would plan your vacation and work trips and find flight options for you, things that we can now do on our phone. Manual machining has been slowly giving way to CNC precision machining for about the last decade or so. We're witness to this shift, right? Flash developers, if you remember Flash. So these are examples of jobs that required a lot of skills. Resumes were built on the knowledge that people had developed to be experts in these fields. And this change is accelerating. I think we all feel it. Has anyone here heard of change fatigue? I'm here to tell you that it is not going to slow down. So I want to encourage you to lean into the pace of change and let go of the resistance to change so that new ideas are sparked on how to attract the talent of tomorrow. Companies have started assessing candidates for their potential and not their technical skills. So companies are saying that they can train on the technical skills required for the job, and they're hiring instead for adaptability, resiliency, the desire to learn, motivation, snap, in emerging occupations. So this is already having a huge impact on manufacturing. Think about lithium batteries, semiconductors, and things that we don't even yet know need to be produced are going to have to be produced quickly. So, and also with the new infrastructure money, the renewable energy companies are going to be sourcing talent through apprenticeships and other work-based learning models. This earn while you learn the skills for the job. And then finally, people are just not keeping their jobs for as long as they did in the past. Retention is a concern across industries. And I ran some data on this. So there's a bit to unpack with this chart, but it shows age groups in columns starting on the left with 18 to 19-year-olds and moving into older age groups on the right with 55 to 64-year-olds. So you can see that younger employees tend to stay in their jobs less time, and the more seasoned employees are staying in their jobs more time. But across all the age groups, I want you to notice that there's a decline in the length of tenure for every age group. So I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm gonna try to circle this group. We're gonna talk about 25 to 35 to 34-year-olds. 10 years ago, 25 to 34-year-olds kept a job for 3.2 years. And in 2022, this age group only kept a single job for 2.8 years. So in light of these trends, how might we attract talent into a workforce knowing that they may stay with you for only a short period of time? An apprenticeship is a good answer to that question. So we looked at the landscape externally, and we know about some things that are out there that impacting our ability to recruit and retain talent. So now let's take a minute to do some self-reflection about our own places of business, things that are well within our control. So equity metrics. You can run some data on the representation across demographic groups to understand your hiring practices. You can look at wages disaggregated by race and gender and see if there's gaps. Looking at your retention, who's leaving and after how long? Are you doing exit interviews? What are you doing with the data that you're collecting from these exit interviews? Do you know why people are leaving? And until you measure these things, you're really not going to know where your company is on these metrics, and then you can't take steps to improve those gaps. Does your company have a written commitment to DEIA? And it should be on your website, and it should also be shared as a value throughout the company. It can't be lip service. It needs to be a real commitment with budget behind it and accountability measures built into how your workplace is becoming more equitable. Updating job descriptions is just something that should be done at least annually. And it's a good idea to have people in your targeted audience read the job description and provide feedback on whether or not they would apply for the job, or if anything turned them off or left them with questions or misperceptions about your workplace. We all have unconscious biases, so providing training for everyone in your workplace is just a good idea. And all of this speaks to the value proposition for working at your company. We all know what our value proposition is for our customers, right? Why we have the best product, why we offer the best service, you know. But what is the value proposition for working for your company? Why would a candidate choose to work for you over any of the other options they may have available? And how would your current workforce describe the company to their friends and family to support your reputation as a valued employer? So with that, we're going to look at JFF's quality jobs framework. This is actually before it's being published, so you're getting a first look, if you will, and it's a snapshot really. And this is meant to offer guidance to employers on conditions that signal a quality job. It's intended to identify the full picture of what is important to workers today beyond a living wage. So there's 4 elements: structure, compensation, agency and culture, and advancement, and those make up the elements of quality. And I'm going to go into each of those. So structure, a quality job should be a safe working environment for everyone. So that means that there should be clear workplace health and safety policies, including anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies that have accountability measures baked in. And this includes reasonable accommodations for workers with disabilities. It should have proper classification of workers and contractors, fair, consistent, and predictable scheduling, at least 3 weeks in advance, so that people have time to plan for things they want to do with their family. You could implement policies and practices to prevent last-minute changes. Full-time workers should receive overtime pay and flexible working arrangements if it's allowable or if it's possible, and you know, remote work arrangements where it's reasonable. And then in terms of job security, you can certainly implement policies and practices that protect workers from arbitrary discrimination, discipline, or dismissal, so that they have a sense of job security. And then compensation, jobs should pay at least a living wage, preferably a thriving wage. Wages should be fair, equitable across demographics, and transparent, meaning that they should be listed in the job descriptions for what a person can expect to earn in a given role. And it shouldn't have anything to do with what a person earned previously. So you could maybe remove that box from your application, because it doesn't matter what a person made before, it matters what you're paying for this job. Wages should be adjusted periodically to reflect changes in the cost of living. And compensation, the total package, should include benefits like healthcare, family leave, vacation and sick time, and mental health resources, and really promoting using the mental health resources. The third element of quality is that it should offer employees agency and culture. So that includes a sense of belonging, to feel like you're welcome and you're a part of the team. Psychological safety is sort of a person's ability to freely offer feedback on company policies or practices and not fear retaliation. Workers should feel like they can bring concerns to HR. It should be a safe space to discuss any workplace issues like pay, benefits, conflict resolution, or instances of harassment or discrimination, and that something's actually going to be done about it. Workers should have the right to organize collectively and be empowered to provide input on their individual work as well as organizational decisions. That's where your innovation is going to come from the people who are actually doing the work. And there have been a couple of excellent reports recently published on worker voice that speaks to this element of worker input. The Institute for Women's Policy Research just released their 2023 report on women in manufacturing called Perspectives from the Shop Floor. And I encourage you to read that report. I found the report to be highly constructive, and I was surprised by the overall great experiences. But there was one finding in the report that harassment was the #1 reason for women leaving a manufacturing role. And so an excellent retention measure would be to offer some harassment prevention training and to put some accountability measures into how your company handles complaints. And then also women aren't provided advancement opportunities as often as men, according to the report. So that's another thing that you might look into. And then finally, a meaningful commitment to DEIA. And I mentioned that one in self-reflection, but companies need to prioritize DEI practices to ensure equitable treatment of all workers. So this should be a whole job. It needs dedicated staff. It can't be tacked onto someone else's other duties, like someone in HR, oh, you can also be our DEI coordinator. No, you really need to have some budget behind it, a plan behind it, so that they can make a training plan and understand where the company is on your DEI maturity. And then also, to finish my thought on the other recently published report, it was called Worker Voices. And this was called Shifting Perspectives and Expectations on Employment. And this was published by Fed Communities. And that report was very moving and focused on the challenges that so many workers faced during the pandemic. I encourage you to read about worker voices as a possible frame for listening to your own workforce and potentially figuring out, where they see you. And then finally, advancement, a quality job bases hiring and promotion decisions on skills and competencies rather than arbitrary criteria like tenure. And I'll tell you, I have personally been passed over for a promotion earlier in my career that was handed to a less qualified man because he had been at the company longer. And so I can share from experience that it's a great way to build resentment in your workforce, which you don't want. So transparent and well-defined career pathways that outline the skills and competencies required to advance in the company, and how to access the training for those competencies. Providing coaching and training and mentorship, and potentially even connecting workers with resources to help them remove financial barriers like EAP programs or employee assistance programs. And then finally, quality jobs prioritize mobility by developing talent from within before hiring external candidates. And nearly every one of these quality markers are embedded in registered apprenticeship programs, and there's a lot of support available to launch one. Now, I also want to introduce JFF's program design framework for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in registered apprenticeship. And I'm going to pause on this slide so that you can take a minute to capture this QR code, because this is our this is the program design framework for apprenticeships. And this is the framework, right? So you can see that there's this blue square on the bottom that's sort of the foundation, and the foundational elements are about the company, and that's those job quality markers that we talked about just a minute ago. Leadership and staff diversity. The leadership of your company and even the board should be just as representative of the diversity in your location as your front line. And then employer readiness. That's a lot of those quality markers that I just talked about. So are you ready for this type of DEIA program design? Then sitting on top of that frame is the organizational conditions that support success. So you see each of these little circles, there's 2 circles in the blue part, and then there's these other circles. The yellow ones are about in the experiences of your apprentices, and the red ones are about sort of the program design elements. And some of these we've already talked about. So livable wages, we talked about in the job quality framework. Advancement opportunities, that's part of job quality. Participant voice and a culture of belonging, we just talked about that too. I didn't talk about equitable data practices, so I'm going to kind of cover that one in a minute. But then the experiences of apprentices also includes things like mentorship and accessible and representative instruction. And each of the elements in the framework, so I hope that you download it, is going to give you recommendations on partnerships that can support you working towards these goals. So I'm just going to touch on this because it's your homework to download this report and really get into it yourself. But one of the things that I said I hadn't covered was data practices. And so I just want to show you that in each section of the report where each of these little circles were, there's going to be advice, there's going to be tactics that can help you build the foundation for effective data-driven decision making, which is this particular one. And so there's some things that you can do to build this into your program to kind of bake it in, and then the partnership considerations. So some things that are about data practices are recognizing sensitivity concerns. People don't always want you collecting their data. They may want to know what you're doing with their data. If you do build an apprenticeship program, which I encourage you to do, ensuring that apprentices understand the differences between self-identification and self-disclosure of their disability status. So self-identification might be that they would put it on a form. They might be going to your ADA coordinator, but self-disclosure is actually so that they can get a reasonable accommodation. And then some partnership ideas and considerations are about policymakers and decision makers. This could include partnering with organizations that can help with data collection and analysis. And then the next one that I want to cover is about the apprentice experience element of mentorship. So every apprentice is required to have a mentor. Most apprenticeship programs have a 1-to-1 ratio on mentor to apprentice. There are some programs, and it really depends on what state you're in, that would allow a 2-to-1 ratio on having 2 apprentices to 1 mentor. But for the most part, each apprentice has a dedicated person who's going to oversee their training and progress against a set of competencies. So providing some support for the mentor is a really good idea. So some training partners that you could find to support mentor training would be potentially community colleges or other providers. There's a lot of support available for training your mentors. And it's just really a good idea, rather than putting somebody into this position where now you have this new role where you're a mentor to this new apprentice, and they might not understand. They might be the best welder you've ever had, but maybe they've never been a mentor before. And so just offering them some training is a good practice. So if you're thinking that's a lot, oh my gosh, that's an ideal place, and here's some things these are some of the things that we can't really do. Wouldn't that be nice? Or if any of this is even slightly overwhelming to you, I highly recommend public-private partnerships. Trust me when I say that your local community college wants to partner with you to understand the skills that you're going to be hiring for over the next 5 to 10 years. Without employers signaling the skills that they're going to hire for, that they need in their workforce, colleges are going to have no idea, no way of knowing how to embed those things into their curriculum. Every program of study within a community college has an advisory committee that informs curriculum decisions, and you can weigh in on that now. And then you need to take the next step and make a hire from one of those college programs. I ran an apprenticeship program and partnership engagement for a community college for several years, and we surveyed the employers at the end of every site visit, or 2 times per year. And one of the questions that we had in the survey asked them to compare the amount of training that they had to do with any new hires compared to their apprentices. So if the new hire had a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree, wanted to compare how much training they had to do. And interesting, there was never much of a difference. If anything, we heard that they actually had to do less training with the apprentices, because the apprentices knew that they were in a program to learn the skills required for the job. The apprentices knew that they were unqualified for the job, and therefore they closely followed instructions and they paid more attention. If employers are expending the same amount of effort training a new hire with a bachelor's degree as an unqualified apprentice, then the apprentice hire will naturally cost less in wages, reach productivity for the company faster, and stay longer on the job than any other hire. And there's retention data available to support this. One of our great partners is Women in Manufacturing. Obviously, you're on a Women in Manufacturing webinar right now. They're a great partner for Jobs for the Future, and they also have a huge repository of videos available for you to use in your recruiting efforts, just like the one that we saw at the beginning of this webinar. Chicago Women in Trades is another group that I want to mention. They're a great partner for JFF. They have an excellent website with tons of resources and ideas on recruiting women specifically. You should already be using the Universal Outreach tool, and I think Lisa or Jen is going to drop a link to that in the chat. This tool is available on the Department of Labor website to support your recruiting efforts. And you just put in your location, and then colleges and CBOs and veteran centers and all kinds of organizations are then pinpointed on a map. There's a little balloon. So then you can see what type of population they support, and there's their contact information, and you can reach out, or you could just drive by because they're in your location. And if you are an organization that can help apprenticeship sponsors and other companies with targeted recruiting, and your organization does not pop up with a little balloon, then to get on this list, and please do try to get on this list so that folks can find you, contact your local ATR or apprenticeship training representative. Then I'm going to recommend the Partner Finder. I think on this line I have Partnership Finder, but it's the Partner Finder. And this is a tool that's also on the DOL website, apprenticeship.gov website, and it can help you find partners that can deliver any specific components of your program. And we have a link to that as well. So one component of apprenticeship is recruiting. And so if you have an apprenticeship program and you need to find sources of talent, other programs in your area, you could find them through the Partner Finder. So play around with those tools, please. And then, of course, I would be remiss not to mention industry intermediaries. There are a lot of industry intermediaries across the field that are available to help you in creating more equitable workplaces, developing equitable recruiting strategies, and support for registering your apprenticeship program, and also helping you find partners who exist in your local workforce ecosystem. And Jobs for the Future is one such intermediary. So we work with manufacturing and agriculture industries and other industries on other projects, also youth apprenticeships. So I welcome you to reach out to us, and there's a QR code coming up soon that you can do that. Targeted outreach. So now we know some things that are happening in the labor market, and we've done some assessment of our own workplaces and considered some possible changes that we could make to our own working environments to be more welcoming. And we know that we don't have to do it alone. There's dozens of partners available to help. So let's talk about recruiting in this market into the jobs you have available. You already notify your recruitment resources of openings, and you don't have to stop doing that, but just dig a little deeper. So if you have an apprenticeship program, there's this thing called a utilization analysis, and you have to do it. It's a requirement of registered apprenticeship programs. Once you register your program, you're going to have access to this demographic analysis tool that's available. It's on the Affirmative Action Plan Builder, but if you have an apprenticeship program, I'll help you find it. It's in the Rapids database. And this is going to tell you specific populations that you should target in your recruiting efforts. So don't just assume that you need to recruit more women. Have some data to back that up and to use in measuring your progress. If you don't have access to the demographic analysis tool, you can find this type of data in lots of other places, MZ, Burning Glass, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Reference USA. In most libraries, it's free. Or you could call your economic development director, but do kind of mark where you are today so that you can make a goal of where you want to go. And then use marketing materials that are representative of the population you're trying to recruit. So make sure your materials are accessible and in the languages most often spoken throughout the area, and keep data on what it is that's working. So this is also sort of a self-reflection exercise, but externally. So get out into the community and talk about your company and your brand, and try to understand how your company is perceived. So you need to partner with these organizations even before you have openings. Present about your program wherever you can. Ask to present to audiences available through the community colleges, through high schools, particularly to any students who are in a program of study that's relevant to your industry. Junior high schools is also a good idea. And you should create a leave behind that has all the details, because everything that you say, people will forget, and they're going to want to tell their mom or their spouse or their adult children or whoever it is. So explain the apprenticeship, the requirements for the selection, the availability and frequency of your opportunities or openings, how to apply, where to click the link to apply, include your EEO pledge. These are just good practices. And then cast a really wide net. So use social media to connect with the sources that you find on the Partner Finder or in the Universal Outreach tool. Connect your company's social media to their social media. And then whenever, if you ask them for followers, then they're going to know when you have an opening because you'll post. And then really thinking outside of the box. So where to advertise in gyms, the YWCA, faith-based organizations like synagogues and churches, unions, Goodwill. Go to your Hispanic and Black chambers of commerce. Put an ad on your train line or subways or buses, or even on the bus stop. I heard someone recently say that they're trying to find out how to wrap a bus. You could wrap a bus with the QR code so that they can get directly to your application. Your local unemployment office, the American Job Centers. What about adult sports leagues, daycare centers where parents drop off their kids, neighborhood associations, parks departments, You should be recruiting in Spanish or Polish or Arabic or whatever languages are spoken in your area to perfectly capable workers who simply speak another language. Your company could sponsor a little league team, and that would be a great way to connect with the parents and get your brand out there, create familiarity. And you probably have community reinvestment dollars to spend on those types of efforts rather than your recruiting budget. You could have an open house where the public is welcome to come in and learn about what you do, or maybe have a referral program for underrepresented populations. You could potentially do kind of an opening event. We have an opening and now there's an event so that people could just, see if they're interested. Maybe they don't want to apply, but you could find out if there's a deeper interest by inviting them in to have a conversation that's not an interview. You could have multiple conversations with somebody so that by the time that you bring them in as a candidate, they know who you are and there's a familiarity. And then always ask your job applicants where they heard about your opening to track the effectiveness of your ads. If you have additional ideas to share with the group about where to advertise, please post them in the chat so that we can all benefit from your knowledge. So now we're going to talk about how might we, and I know we're almost out of time, but if you heard me say something today and it made you think we can't do that, I really want to encourage you to flip your thinking to a how might we statement. You can explore these things, these how might we statements with your team at work and focus on solutions. And if you thought we can't create shifts that anybody can work at any time, it would be chaos. Or if you're currently feeling that resistance to change, or if you're getting this little wrinkle in your brow, think about how might we. And when we frame things as a how might we statement, it's like being a kid again. Your imagination has no limits. So you can get with your team and explore some how might we's. How might we provide childcare assistance for families? Well, not everyone would need it. You could do individualized benefits. So maybe one person needs childcare, but another person needs transportation support. You could maybe do this with a scholarship program. There's all kinds of ideas that you could use. I just encourage you to widen the aperture of your lens. Does applying to your company require applicants to go online or to have a resume? And who can put their hands on their resume, their current resume right now without having to do a computer search? And what if you didn't have a computer? What if you didn't have access to the internet? Or could you assess candidates through a form like a Survey Monkey form or some other skills assessment rather than them having to do a resume? I mean, can you make small changes that could make a huge difference? Maybe they could do some type of skills demonstration. Are you letting an AI tell you who to hire, or are you being a human and giving an opportunity to another human? What privilege that I can give someone an opportunity to earn money, to feed their family, to support themselves. That's power. And I encourage you to use your power for good and consider how might we create pipelines of talent of people who want to work for us without having to do any recruiting at all. So this is the QR code to request technical assistance. We can help you build a registered apprenticeship program. You can meet with our team to explore resources or join a group technical assistance cohort. We have, levels of maturity. So we would put you in a cohort of others who are at that same maturity level, and get free individualized coaching to design, develop, and launch a registered apprenticeship program that can support your recruiting and retention needs. And I want to leave you with the idea that modern recruiting is really about inviting people to participate in the vision that you have for your organization and inviting them to use their skills and talents towards that vision. Recruiting isn't about getting someone hired. It's about building a relationship that can last their entire professional life. And as employees accumulate knowledge, you can make a plan about how we can share and transfer that knowledge to someone else. So that is all that I have for you today. Thank you very much for listening and for participating. If you'd like to capture my contact information, now is your chance. I'm going to take down this presentation for questions, although we only have a couple of minutes. I hope you heard something that you can take action on today. And if you heard something actionable or interesting, post it in the chat. And if you have a question, go ahead and post it in the Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And I'm just keeping an eye here on the chat to see if anyone has any questions for Melissa that we can go ahead and share. So we'll just give it about one more minute or so. And then if there are no questions, we can close out for the day. Jen, are you seeing any questions on your end? Just making sure I didn't miss it.
No, not yet.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for your participation.
Sure. Thank you, Melissa. So if there are no questions, I'd like to thank you, Melissa. And
So there is one,
oh, there's
sorry.
one. Okay. Okay, good. Okay.
Melissa, she would like to know what skill sets are very common in the industry that you've seen recently.
Skill sets that are common. I mean, it would really depend on the occupation. Can you give me an idea of what occupation you're talking about? I would, in my opinion, I think the best skill sets to look for are some of the things that I mentioned earlier, sort of this, adaptability, the desire to learn, someone who's willing, who's bringing, the tabula rasa, the blank slate, right? Someone, if someone comes in and they think that they know everything already, they're really not going to be open to learning your company's ways of doing business. But if you find someone who has that passion, that desire to learn, you can teach them anything. They're gonna want it. Maybe they're hungry. You know what I mean? So that's the skill set that you really want to be hiring for, rather than anything technical. You can teach them the technical things. They can learn that in the education components that are attached to a registered apprenticeship program. So there's kind of these two parts, right? It goes hand in hand, on the job training and related technical instruction. And they're going to get the foundational skills and knowledge that they need in the apprenticeship program or for your occupation in the educational components. And then they're going to get the ability to put into practice the things that they've learned in the classroom immediately. So that's that theory and practice, right? So the technical skills for your position, they're gonna come, and they're gonna come faster than they would if they weren't having that educational component, and then those ability to kind of sit with their mentor and understand more about why they're learning this new thing. But if you hire somebody, if you're looking for someone who's fully qualified, you're going to have a harder time. So if I was in a room of people, and this is a virtual room, but if I was in a room full of people and I said, how many people in here can rebuild an engine? There might be one person who raises their hand. But if I said, how many people in this room can learn how to build an engine? Well, your candidate pool expands. And so anybody can learn how to build an engine. And so that's what you're looking for. You're looking for to diversify your workforce and to find talent. You're looking for unqualified talent rather than qualified talent, because then through partnership with the education piece and the ability to train them in your company's exact ways, they'll become the ideal candidate, and they'll be trained specifically for you. So, I mean, really, that's all I can say about that, unless I know more specifics about the occupation that you're talking about.
All right, thanks, Melissa. It looks like to clarify, she was just wondering about just the manufacturing industry. So I think that helps a lot with what your response was to that. So the next question we have here is from Margarita. She wants to know, what are some good practices to make sure our hiring post is targeting the right audience?
Well, I kind of talked about this in the presentation, but use the universal outreach tool. Find some organizations that are local to your area who are already attracting and connected to the target audience. You want to know who you're targeting first. So, do the utilization analysis that I talked about, where you understand who you already have and who you need to target. And so let's say, for a fact that your local area has 15% Hispanic. And then you look at your own workforce and you realize 2% of your workforce is Hispanic. Well, then you need to target Hispanic populations. So there's a lot of things that you could do in that particular instance. I mean, you could certainly post on churches, change the language of your recruiting materials. There are, you don't have to do this by yourself. Use the universal outreach tool and find some partners in your area who work with that specific population, and connect with them even when you don't have an opening, just so that you continue to maintain the familiarity. And I think that answers the question, but Marguerite, please let me know if you need more specifics.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Jason is asking if you are seeing any trends in increased pay for entry-level manufacturing positions, including registered apprenticeship programs.
I am. Increased pay is a trend that I'm seeing. I happen to know that it's the Committee on Apprenticeships made recommendations to the Department of Labor that there should be a wage that is 200% of the poverty level for a particular area. Now that's kind of a lot to unpack, but yes, wages are going up. It's hard to find talent. People want to work for someone who's going to help them feed their families. It's just a good practice to have an attractive offer. You want to say, we want you to join our workforce, and here are all the benefits, and you want it to be something that they can't, like an offer they can't refuse, right? You want it to be more than $15 an hour. You want to pay someone an amount of money that would help them feed their family and pay their rent and their car notes, and not have to get a second job so that they show up tired the next day to work. Just being really thoughtful about that can really help you out. And yes, it's trending up. So
Great.
yeah.
Very good. Up next, we have Kalishia. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. Where can we get the Brinkley skill set for soft skills? Is there a course that you recommend?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I always wanted to start a soft skills course whenever I was in a community college, and it was always something like, oh, these things are embedded in our curriculum in the courses, and I haven't actually heard of a good soft skills course. And if I do find one, I'll make sure that the group at Women in Manufacturing finds out about it. I'll send them a link, but it's my favorite soft skills list is by MIT JWL, and it's called the Human Skills Matrix. And this one lists 4 quadrants of skills, and I'm gonna, I'd have to have it right in front of me to really explain it, but it's a really good soft skills group of skills that talks about, here are some things that are about ourselves, here are some things that are about managing others. And it includes things like digital literacy, obviously problem solving. And those things, in my opinion, really come from experience. I don't know that that's something that can actually be part of the educational component or the RTI, the related technical instruction of a registered apprenticeship program. Those are going to be things that when you are mentoring an apprentice within your organization or within your company, you give them opportunities to try things, and they have those opportunities to put into practice things that they've learned in the classroom, but also new experiences that maybe they have to get practice with before they're going to be fully qualified. And so problem solving, that comes with experience. Communication is something that everybody wants, and it can be taught. There's some significant differences, in my opinion, between the communication skills and age groups. Younger people communicate in a completely different way than older people. And so having some generational support, some multi-generation workforce coordinators to talk about, here's how this generation communicates, and here's how this other generation communicates, and how you can find some commonality is just kind of a really good practice, or else you're not speaking the same language. It's also the same exact problem with community colleges and employers. You're talking in two different languages and not understanding each other and having different expectations of each other. And really sitting down and doing some expectation management is always a good practice. Yeah, I don't have a soft skills course, but I can point you to that one soft skills list. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and it looks like Jen shared a link in the chat that was shared by
Yes,
attendees, so that's great.
Human skills matrix, yes.
Great. Another question. So it looks like we go till 3, so we have a little bit more time and a handful more questions. So what is the minimum running time for an apprenticeship program to be evaluated, and how often should it be evaluated?
So an apprenticeship program has to be at least a year long. So that's why, for a good while, people were trying to develop apprenticeship programs out of the CNA, because CNAs, it's hard to find CNAs. There's a labor shortage, but you can become a CNA after a 6-week training. And so it's really not ideal for an apprenticeship program. If you have an apprenticeship program and it's only a year long, you're probably going to get evaluated once. And I would, in my experience, I would say that you're probably going to get evaluated annually, or if you have a 2-year program, once, maybe twice. You're not going to, the Department of Labor isn't going to evaluate programs all the time because they don't have the capacity to do so. So, actually we have a webinar that's going to be coming up this summer through our program that is on how to prepare for your program review with the Department of Labor. So if you get connected with us, we'll be sure to send you the invitation to that webinar. And we have a partner called Donna Linhoff and Associates, and she's a lawyer, and she can help you with all of the things. It'll be a good webinar, so I invite you to come to that.
Great. Thank you. And then this one, let's see, the next question is, do you have recommendations on helping with getting manager buy-in for starting apprenticeship programs within a manufacturing setting when there is resistance?
Well, that's a good question. Getting manager buy-in is, you could potentially find some other companies who are your vendors or your competitors or your friends or your, people who do some similar work in your area, who have a program, and kind of just talk about how it's working for them. You can appeal to their business side and talk about how it's going to be cheaper to hire an apprentice than it is to hire any other talent, which there's a lot of data out there on that as well. The person earlier asked about wages, and they are trending up, but you can still hire unqualified talent for less money than you can hire fully qualified talent. It's expensive to hire qualified talent. And so if you have someone who's unqualified and you're also training them and giving them their step up in life, then you can show someone on paper or maybe an Excel spreadsheet about how you're going to have some cost savings. There's an ROI calculator that's, I think, called costofahire.com, but don't quote me on that. And you could put some numbers in there, and then do some other calculations about how much it normally costs you to hire and onboard a new person, and what your retention rates are. So there's the business aspect of it. And then you can also kind of appeal to the human aspect of it in terms of, developing the next generation of talent, and, your overall sustainability of your company, and, where do they see the next person, the next foreman or manager coming from if you're not going to be developing the talent within, and then replacing that front line with new folks. It's it's a sales job, right? And so you have to be able to handle some objections and have some data at your fingertips to sort of circumvent any of the resistance. I know there's resistance out there. I've been on the end of trying to sell apprenticeship programs to employers from a community college perspective, because I was running, and I mentioned this in my talk, that I was running an apprenticeship program. We had 11 occupations, and it was a group sponsorship. The college was the sponsor, and it was a constant sales job about trying to convince people. And you might have one person within the companies, maybe yourself, right? Who's the champion, who like, oh yeah, apprenticeship is the answer for our talent shortage. We could really do this and we could train people and they stay longer. And you might be the person who is, the voice of reason, trying to convince whoever it is, HR, the shop floor manager, the president, the VP of finance, whoever it is, that's kind of the naysayer. And there are sort of different strategies that you might use for different people. If you're getting resistance from sort of the shop floor manager, those, operations managers, how else are they going to find talent? And if you're getting resistance from sort of the president, you can talk about, how there's success in other areas and find companies who can talk about, how it's working for them. And, sometimes it's the messenger and not the message. So if you could get another company to say the same things you're saying, all of a sudden it's a great idea. And so, find somebody who is at their level in another company to say the exact same thing you're trying to say, and it could work. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. And I think you really addressed two other questions that were submitted by Emmett, which one was what the quantitative argument to make to senior leadership when it comes to hiring apprentices versus the open market. So I think you really addressed that well. And then the last question is, how much traction are you seeing across the US when it comes to pre-apprenticeship programs? So we see some states all in and others are not. So, and then you shared a little bit about like the hesitancy with states and or companies in advocating and sponsoring these types of programs for high school talent. So I think you addressed a little bit of that. Not sure if you had anything else.
Yeah, I mean, regarding pre-apprenticeship, you're right, it's all over the map. But then so is registered apprenticeship. There are some states where you can register a program, and there are some states where it's just kind of a nice to have. It's, there's no registration process, and there's no real formal way to build a pre-apprenticeship program. Some of them require employer input, like an internship. Internship and apprenticeship is kind of one of my pet peeves. Internships are always time boxed. So you're an intern for a period of time. You're going to end your internship after a year or after a summer or even maybe a semester. Whereas an apprenticeship is you're hiring this person with the intention of retaining them indefinitely. They are your hire. You have hired a person into a real job. And pre-apprenticeship is kind of this amorphous thing that it's really kind of hard to pin down. I know Wisconsin has codified pre-apprenticeships and they register pre-apprenticeships, but others just don't. And then there's a lot of confusion between pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship. Youth apprenticeship is the same as apprenticeship. It's just that you're hiring somebody who's under the age of 18. And so sometimes that can get really squirrely, particularly in terms of transportation. How are they going to get to the job site? What if they haven't even taken driver's ed yet? What if, there's a lot of considerations about hiring youth, and also with scheduling. They don't have 2,000 hours in a year to work because they're still trying to graduate. You want to keep them on track to graduate. And so, this idea of youth apprenticeship when they're in school youth, it's very difficult to build a program. I'm not saying it's impossible, because I have supported programs in getting built, and I know of some really great programs out there that are designed in a hybrid model. Every apprenticeship program has to kind of choose their how they're going to deliver the program, and it's either time-based, hybrid, or competency-based. And so you can have a competency-based program that supports a youth population very easily. But there is some confusion about youth apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, and registered apprenticeship. And there's also a lot of employers who are using the word apprenticeship just because they think it sounds cool, or they think it's going to help them attract talent if they say that this is an apprenticeship program, and really it's just a job where they're paying someone less and there's no certificate at the end. In a real registered apprenticeship program, the apprentices are registered with the Department of Labor, and at the end of a formal training program where they are learning the competencies for that occupation, they should get a certification, which some states call a journey worker card, other states don't. It's a certification from the Department of Labor that you're fully qualified for that occupation, and it's portable, so you should be able to take that certification with you anywhere in the United States and get a job in that occupation and say you're fully qualified. There's no protections for that type of thing if you're just going to call something an apprenticeship that's not an apprenticeship. So in terms of pre-apprenticeship, I don't know where we're going to land on that. It's always a good idea to try to develop pipelines of talent into your workforce. And so any ways that you can develop either an internship or a pre-apprenticeship that can support a student or a young person learning the skills that will be necessary for them to build a career is a good idea. And then feeding them into a registered apprenticeship program is a best practice. I hope that helps.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I think we're almost out of time here, so I think we're going to wrap up for the day, but thank you so much, Melissa, for your session and for all those great answers. I know that our attendees today really enjoyed it. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. So if you would like more information about registered apprenticeship programs, Jen is putting a link in the chat to reach out to Women in Manufacturing. So you can access those resources there, and they're free to you all. So please feel free to reach out with any questions. And just as a reminder, this session has been recorded. So Jen will be sending a post-webinar email with the link to access that if you wanted to share it with anyone. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day and Memorial Day weekend, and we look forward to seeing you at a future WIM program or event. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.